Welcome back to the Moving Grief podcast. I'm Heather Stang.
And I'm Jason Wendroff-Rawniki, and we're so excited to be here for our next episode. Yeah.
And we are recording this the week after the Thanksgiving holiday, which is so hard when you are grieving. My
Oh,
grief story actually started right before the Thanksgiving holiday when my uncle died in late October.
mm,
And then that first holiday, I was 7 and all the adults were acting like nothing had happened, and it was very strange and hard. No one knew what to do, and that ultimately is why I do this work, is really from that first Thanksgiving. So
wow.
Jason, how about you and the
Yeah.
Thanksgiving holiday?
Well, my sister wound up she died at the end of June, so I had a couple of months of at least kind of a build up to it, but I always find that that little space between Thanksgiving and Christmas or Hanukkah or even the New Year is really a really heavy time because everybody else in society is happy, happy, joy, joy. And, you know, us as grieving people, we're like remembering all the people that aren't with us. And so it's very possible that happiness and joy is not something that I'm going to be able to accomplish, especially in those first, I want to even say 5 or 6 holidays, because I mean, it took a while just to be like, okay, I'll deal with just surviving, never mind happiness and joy. So, but I had a couple of months to sort of
Mhm.
prepare, but Thanksgiving was one of Lauren's favorite holidays. It was like the Halloween, Thanksgiving, that little thing. She loved it. And I knew it was one time of the year that I was going to get a chance to see her because our lives started to get busy. But it was one time of the year I could count on her being around for like a couple days at least and just be able to hang out. So, absolutely super heavy period of time. So, if you are experiencing that weight, just know it's the holidays it's that are coming up. That's usually what triggers it off.
As painful as it is, and as much as we hate it, it is normal. And sometimes I hate saying that over and over again, like it's normal, it's normal. And that doesn't mean I'm diminishing it.
Right.
That doesn't mean we're saying it doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. But we want to remove that self judgment piece. If you're feeling like, why am I not able to enjoy these people I love? Why am I not able to get into the spirit of the season? Grief turns you inward, and
Mm.
you are still needing to nurture yourself, and you're missing your person. You brought up something, Jason. I want to back up a second about it being the one time a year you could count on seeing Lauren. And that
Yep.
is one of the reasons, like, there's so many reasons why the holidays are extra hard, societal pressure to be happy, disruption in your schedule. For those of you who find, some people find going to work every day a nice, normal comfort. Not
Oh
everybody,
yeah.
but then you have the holidays. What do I do with myself? But you brought up that it's like guaranteed time with the person.
Hmm.
And many of you might be thrown into situations with other family members that are complicated because
Oh,
they are also grieving, and you're
yeah.
all grieving in different ways.
Right. And when those grieving styles like clash, it's just it could be a recipe for disaster, like just on a family dynamics
Mhm.
or even on a personal level. Like when one person wants to talk about the lost person, but the parents can't get like I wanted to talk about Lauren. My parents couldn't hear anything about that. And so and even my mom, I remember the first year she was the one that was the host. My mom was hosted every Thanksgiving growing up. And as soon as my sister died, she's just like, nope, ain't happening. Like that first Thanksgiving, she's like, I can't do it. Um, and so she completely stopped. And then my in-laws took over the hosting for a little while. And then my wife and I decided we had to be the ones to host just because everything got super complicated and there was a lot of chaos. And I'm like, but we can systematize this Thanksgiving thing so that this way everyone can enjoy it and it doesn't have to be like chaos. So the last maybe 7 or maybe 10 I don't know. Don't even remember when we started hosting, but it really became much easier once we picked up that task.
And my family is so tiny. I'm estranged from my father. So it's my mother and we don't normally see each other on Thanksgiving. This Thanksgiving for her, it was not only Thanksgiving, but it was also her brother, my uncle Doug's birthday on
Mm.
Thanksgiving.
Wow.
So kind of a double whammy. And I want to just briefly touch on, I think, both of our experiences now, because for context, we're talking about a death that happened in 1977. It is now 2024.
Right.
And while, yeah, we miss him and it's sad, I want those of you who are feeling awful right now to know, and I know we've said this on here before, that eventually you will talk about their life more than their death.
Mm.
And for us, whether we're together or not, Thanksgiving is a celebration of him and our gratitude for what we have left.
Yeah.
So
And it's also good to look at to see like what coping strategies that you try to implement. Like I know it's hard in the beginning to look at it a little bit more logically because our emotions are so heightened that but it's really important to take a look back because guess what? Thanksgiving's coming up next year too, right? Like and to be able to analyze like okay, this really worked for me. This didn't work and how can I make some little small shifts and have a place to write it down for next year, like in a note in a calendar or something like that, so that this way you're like it doesn't hit you out of it's not a surprise because it's coming up next year and it'll happen the year after that. So it's one of those things I think that we don't always we're so enmeshed in the emotion and the missing and the longing that we forget to like use our strategies.
so one of my most popular downloads that's on my website right now and will be through most of the holiday season is a grief sensitive winter holiday planner.
Yeah.
And I walk my clients through this and basically it helps you just like what you're saying, Jason, when you are in a more logical state of mind, it's a better time to plan ahead. What coping skills will I use when I'm triggered? What self care practices do I need to have in place to build resilience? Who are my support systems? And go ahead and get them on the calendar before the holiday season is in full swing. Then you also have, should I go to holiday events or not?
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other yeah, we'll
That's a
dive into that
whole
for
thing.
sure.
And that's one of my favorite classes actually to workshop in my group because we actually come up with a script of how to say no. And I learned something from every single person who works on their own script. Like I kind of have a step by step format, but it's really about your style. And so I always like for me, I like to say to people, I've put a lot of thought into this,
Yeah.
but this year I'm not doing it right. And I was like, be brief because you don't want to give people something to argue with you over. But then somebody else in the group came up with a more specific thought, which was, I have put a lot of thought into this. I will be staying home and eating a really healthy meal and doing yoga and meditation. I was thinking, actually, who would argue with that if someone yells at you for staying home and taking care of yourself? Like, whatever. But so, and then finally, the holiday traditions. How do
Yeah.
you
Well,
handle what you already have? How do you create a new one? But I know what you and I want to talk about right now today is that period that we're
yeah.
in after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and the New Year. New Year's Eve is a tough one too. And
Mhm.
how to reflect back on what was your Thanksgiving like and
Yep.
how to plan for this next round. And as you said, even for the following year.
Right. Yeah, because I know even for me, like this Thanksgiving was really wonderful in some respects, but I overdid it. I overextended myself for sure, and I'm making that note because we do like my family does the traditional Thursday Thanksgiving meal, but then some people can't make it, so we do it again on Friday. And then we actually had house guests Friday night into Saturday. So just all of that, like the setting and resetting, I'm like, ooh. And then so by Sunday, I just needed to take a day and like I had to shut down because I was so overwhelmed with all of the stuff and so overtired that I needed to just chill and take that day of just in my sweaties, don't talk to me. I'm just gonna sit and drool on my couch all
Yeah.
day. So I needed one of those kinds of like recuperating days. And so I realized even 25 years later, just like noticing those things and when things get too much.
So let's workshop this. Let's practice with you.
Yeah.
How you take what you experienced over Thanksgiving and
Yeah.
use it as you move into Hanukkah.
Yeah, 100%. Like as I said, like I'm not going to be hosting like that. That's for sure. Like we've done our Thanksgiving. I'm not going to be hosting. I'm definitely going to take more time to take care of myself and to make sure I'm getting the right rest. And even with the holiday, it took us a week to really get through all the Thanksgiving stuff, and we still have some like pies and things in the refrigerator right now, right? And so I know moving forward, like I'm gonna slowly cut that back out because I it's easy to go down that road of, oh well, I'll just have that piece of pie and that cookie and that thing, and eggnog is my kryptonite. I love eggnog. Yeah, I love eggnog. I It's in my refrigerator. Like I you look surprised.
Okay, so you're the guy who doesn't drink coffee and you juice and like one of the healthiest friends I have. Yes, I am feeling completely like I just got popped into another universe where Jason drinks eggnog and I
Eh,
love eggnog. Just wouldn't
oh,
have
oh
expected
my
it.
God. And as I said, like I have to really have the discipline to not just drink the whole bottle of it because I know it's
So
like,
good.
well, it's so delicious and I can, but it takes every ounce of discipline not to just chug it out of the bottle. And like I give myself a little couple of ounces but yeah. And so that's like, we all have our spot that like we just can't resist. And that's mine.
I think for me with the Thanksgiving holiday, it's always been a rough holiday,
Mm,
whether it was because of a death, my parents' divorce really made Thanksgiving my least favorite holiday. And then I kind of took it back and definitely it became a friendsgiving type of an
yeah.
experience. And particularly with the estrangement with my father, my mother living states away, I tend to spend Thanksgiving with my chosen family, which has been so healing.
Yep.
And I do have a bit of yearning on those days where I'm like, okay, the only person left alive that I speak to is my mom. That's it. And so I'll feel that grief and I'll feel the yearning that 6-year old Heather's joy was before Doug died, when holidays were food and family and blissful. And I'm sure also I was the center of the the show because I was an only child. So I'm sure there's part of that to it. This year hit really hard. I think because maybe I just finished that book that where I dove into my estrangement and with the book launch was really having to face that grief.
Yeah.
And so I felt even though I was with my best friend and her family, which was a lovely gift, I felt it really hard this year, even though there hasn't been a recent death, there hasn't been a recent loss. And
Yeah.
so holidays can kind of sometimes be evergreen with grief.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't as heavy as it has been years past, but it was heavier than normal. Oh, and also a divorce, right? We got that
Yeah.
too.
All right. Throw that
So,
in the
yeah.
mix. Yeah.
So, Christmas, fortunately, I will be with my mother and it will just be her husband and I. So, it will be small and my dog, but I'm going to really savor it and consider maybe spending Thanksgiving with her next year too,
Yeah.
which I never would have thought I would have wanted to travel both holidays. But as I'm getting older, as she's getting older, I'm starting to feel that might be my next plan.
Yeah. Well, and I think like what you mentioned a little bit earlier about like the traditions of the holidays too, and finding that balance sometimes, and this is goes strategic, right? Finding that balance of trying to not replicate, but to hold on to some of the like growing up traditions, but also creating some new ones in the mix as well is really important because I think I know I try to replicate exactly what we did growing up. And then it's never going to be that, right? Like it's
Right.
never going to be that. Like Lauren's not here. So there, like that in and of itself is almost a futile attempt to try to replicate all of the traditions that I had growing up rather than, all right, like how do I keep that essence of those traditions, but make it something new? So the few things that I know I do on all the holidays is I have a necklace with a charm of a ballet slipper, and that ballet slipper was made from her jewelry. My parents, when they collected her jewelry, they made three. I think they made four, but I know they definitely made three. One for my mom, one for my dad, and one for me. And so every holiday, I take a moment and I put on that necklace and I just take a second, like it's not like a long ritual. It's just putting the necklace on, taking a moment of giving thanks, knowing that she's with me. And it hangs like right close to my heart. So it's kind of symbolic that way too. Nobody knows that I'm doing this. It's a little personal tradition. So regardless of how my mom and dad are feeling or the rest of the family, this is something I need to do for me so that I can keep her present in the holiday during the holiday time and without anybody else knowing. I didn't never made a big deal about it. I think I mentioned it on a podcast or on an internet, I think one of Heidi's internet television shows. I had it on and I showed it, and my mom saw the episode. She was like, I didn't even realize you still had that thing. Like, I was like, yeah. And she's like, and the fact that you wear it every holiday, she was a little blown away because it's not something like I trumpeted out to people. It's just something that I kept really close to my heart. And there are all kinds of things that you can do like that. And I do encourage people and my clients to find those things. It's maybe different, but in that same essence to keep their memory present during the holidays.
Essence is a key word here, and
Yeah.
intention. So the
Yeah.
difference between a habit and a tradition really is intention and meaning,
Yeah.
right? Because you can habitually do the same thing every year and not really think about it. There's certain decorations that I pull out and throw on the couch, and I wouldn't call that a tradition because it
Yeah.
doesn't have meaning for it. But pulling out my grandmother's vintage little light up tree with those little lights that stick in the holes that everybody has, and you lose the plastic little bulbs, and that to me is a tradition because I really think about my grandmother and how much she loved that tree, and it's my way of honoring her. And the essence, the feelings that it evokes is what makes it meaningful. And also, you brought up personal ritual because we have personal rituals, we have family rituals.
Yeah.
And I like having both. I like having things I do that are very private that nobody else is going to know about, and then things that like I will do with my mother, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually a practice that we do in group too is what can you do individually, what can you do as a family, and then for to keep it creative, I came up with what would you do indoors by
Yeah.
yourself? What would you do outdoors by yourself? What would you do indoor with family? What would you do outdoor? Just to kind of open up the brain in terms of getting creative around these because there are so many different things that you can do.
Well, and I think that most people, a lot of people get stuck in whatever like the societal traditions are. Like, oh, we have to have a tree. All right.
Mhm.
Why? Do you really need a tree? Maybe it's a bush. Maybe it's something else, right? Like, and I get like it. Well, and my wife keeps saying I want a Hanukkah bush, but that actually doesn't really exist
Well,
because she
maybe it
loves
does
the tree,
now,
right?
Hanukkah bush.
And it's thinking outside the box. Like something one of my on my meeting literally last night, a recommendation that I've never heard before is that one of my fellow siblings had their Thanksgiving the Monday before. And it was just because a family member couldn't make it on Thursday. So that's what the family decided. We're going to do Thanksgiving on the Monday before. And she said that that was the best thing that that her family could have done, because it took all the pressure of like Thanksgiving being on Thursday. And she's like, check, I'm doing that again next year, because it just like she was stressing. It was her first Thanksgiving without her brother, and then just it released all of the pressure. I'm like, well, why not having Thanksgiving on if that's what works? Some people go away on vacation to some like tropical. I love that idea, like just to kind of vacate, just to take a break from their normal everyday. I think that's fantastic because it, and that could be for some families that becomes their tradition of taking a trip somewhere or taking a cruise or just getting out of Dodge for a couple of minutes just to take that necessary break from whatever their lives are going through in their
It's just
lives.
about questioning, why are we doing this and
Yeah.
what would serve us better during this time? Remembering that just because you do it differently this year does not mean you have to do it differently forever.
Ever, right? Well, and it also taking a questioning, like, and that's why we're like going over this idea of questioning what worked and what didn't work during Thanksgiving, because once you start questioning, it makes those unconscious habits more intentional. It's like, oh, right, that didn't work. Why am I doing this thing that I'm doing? And starting to question even the suppositions underneath. And if you keep questioning, you'll get to the root of, okay, maybe I need to change this tradition because it doesn't work in this way. And how will it work moving forward, which is the bigger question.
So, how do we help our listeners go through this inquiry process? What
Yeah.
would you like to offer? I think it's time, I feel, if you
Yeah,
do, to move
yeah.
in. Every episode, we really try to give you practical things to do. And
Right.
so, Jason, I'm going to pass the ball to you and see what you would like to share.
Yeah, so like the biggest thing that I could offer is just going back to that to Thursday, if you celebrated on Thursday, and just take a couple of minutes and kind of go through the day like in your own mind. Actually, so let's do that now, right? So sit down. Well, since I see you're already prepping,
I'm
let's,
it's like as soon as you went there, my eyes closed and I sat back. I have a Pavlovian response that I'm going to be led through a practice every
yeah.
episode.
But that's the importance though. Before you get like that's the importance of habit, right? Like once you don't have to think about it, and that's the beauty of it. But that's also one of the biggest downfalls of our habits is that we don't have to think about it, and they become automatic. And so this helps to just shift and change what how you viewed your holiday. So let's go ahead. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So come to sit up nice and tall. Just close the eyes. Bring attention back to breath. And if you can, just gently breathing in and out through the nose. If obviously are a little congested, try in through the nose or out through the mouth, however feels comfortable for you. And just settling into your seat. Just take a moment of notice what you're feeling physically, or I should say what you're sensing physically, what you're feeling emotionally, and what you're thinking mentally. Just notice how they relate to each other, our sensations, our emotions, and our thoughts. And then I want you to bring your awareness back to whenever your Thanksgiving was, whether it's Thursday or Monday or Friday. And I want you to mentally visualize yourself and go through the day and just notice those little touch points. And don't just go through it in your mind. I want you to notice how you feel as you moved through the day. Was there a point in the day that really triggered you or maybe made you feel amazing or made you feel calm? And notice also the sensations that you feel in the body as you mentally go through each element of that day. Because when we review it in our minds with that full association of emotion and sensation, then it's as if it's happening now. And I want you to notice any tool or strategy that you used throughout that day. Maybe for me, it was like putting on my necklace. Maybe you have a touchstone, or maybe it's the act of setting up your Thanksgiving table or preparing the food. And just take a second just to notice what worked for you and notice what didn't feel right for you. And just take a moment just to know that you were able to make it through that day. And maybe that's even enough, right? In the beginning, survival is what we're after. And then as you develop more tools and strategies, then you can tweak it. And just take a moment just to know and feel a sense of accomplishment that you are able to make it through, that you can do hard things, that you can learn to master your emotions. You can learn to master your sensations and your thoughts. So things can be sad, things can be scary, things can be frightening, and you can still do it anyway. And then just take another just moment just to bring your awareness back to your body, back to your heart, back to your mind. And then when you feel ready, then you can just gently crack open your eyes so that you can bring in the floor and the rest of the room. And if you have a pad and paper with you, just make a little note, like write down, all right, this worked, this didn't work, this felt great, this didn't feel so good. And so that this way you have like just a way of measuring what your experience was.
I love that you acknowledged that the victory is surviving because so
Yeah.
often grieving people are told, "Oh, you're so strong." And they don't
Oh,
feel it, right? It's like,
yeah. Oh,
shut
right.
up. You're
Yeah.
forced into it. This is a forced strength.
Yeah.
But just because it's forced doesn't mean it isn't also a victory.
Oh, but right. And in the beginning, like survival is key. And I think that's people put a lot of judgment on different behaviors, right? Like I needed to go to like when my sister died, I needed to go to work like 2 weeks later because I needed to think of something else, right? Is it an avoidance? Could it be an avoidance? Sure, to keep busy, but intentionality is key, right? Knowing how it functions. For me, I needed to like my boss was like, take another 2 weeks off. I said, no, I need to cut. Like that's what I needed. I needed to get back to work because I needed some space. I was grieving 24/7, 2 weeks. And it was like, I'm like, okay, I need to focus on something else. And so work allowed me to do that. Was it a little bit of a divergence? For sure. But it was the way I needed to do to survive. And then I was able to be like, okay, let's go back to those feelings and those thoughts. Let's start to analyze them, right? We can't ignore them forever. I tried, didn't work, but it's like that survival mindset is a victory because
Yeah.
it's so easy to give up. It's so easy to just pack it in. And so just remembering from one day to the next, if you're surviving, you're doing good. You're doing a
Yeah.
good job, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not about getting through it gracefully, it's about getting through it.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, the whole reason we give you these exercises is so you can get through it with less suffering
Right,
and
right.
hopefully with more love and more meaning. So I want to circle back to that idea of writing down because this is my favorite
Yeah.
practice the week after Thanksgiving. This is what we do every single year without fail in my wake and grief support group the Monday and Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So you do a meditation, exactly what Jason led you through. You make 3 lists: what didn't go well, what went well, and what was the overall outcome of the day. And then you can kind of savor that list, kind of look back over the 3 lists, and then go a little deeper and integrate it. What are you going to do with this information you've just written down? Is there something you noticed you did that helped that you can carry into the next holiday? Is there something you noticed that did not help? And that might be how you responded, or it might be being around a certain person and maybe you just decide not to be around that person. Sometimes I would say sometimes the problems really aren't coming from us, right? They're coming from
Right.
outside of us. It's that weird Uncle Bob or whoever who says that really insensitive thing. Sorry to anyone who has a nice Uncle Bob. I just pulled that out of the air. But also reflecting on what surprised you, because a
Yeah.
lot of times when we go through this in Awaken, people will say, it wasn't as hard as I expected it to be. Now, part
Hmm.
of that is because we've spent weeks preparing
Yeah.
for Thanksgiving, but also sometimes it's just that anticipation leading up that's adding on the
Yeah.
fear and the suffering.
Well,
So,
and I want to actually just before you kind of go out like that, like having a plan and preparing, but then letting go of the result. Like
yes.
I know we get so into like it has to be this and this and this, and then we just drive ourselves crazy. But you could wake up, you could have a whole plan in place, and then you wake up in the morning and you're like, nope, I don't want to do that. Like
Mhm.
that's like, yes, I prepared it. This is what I thought it should be. But in the morning, it's like, well, no, I don't want to go to, you know, my in-laws house or my parents house. I just want to go walk in the park, right? Like or go have a quiet time doing yoga and meditation and really just being by myself and introspective that day, right? Like and if that's the case, then follow your gut. Like follow, let go, throw the plan out and just do what serves you.
Sometimes that process of doing the plan lets you find out what you don't actually want to do. You look at the list.
Yeah.
And we do this for special day. I call them special days, anniversaries, birthdays, death days, diagnosis days, where I have a very similar process taking people through what's your plan going to be on that day. And sometimes you wake up and you're like, no, this is not the plan today. This was
Yeah.
the plan from last week. But the fact that you are bringing mindful inquiry,
Hmm.
that's the practice, not
100%.
sticking to it, right?
Well, and then most people don't even know what they want, right? Like you ask, what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to spend your holidays? It's like, I have no clue. So, like, really drilling in and asking yourself those questions. And it's going to take years to figure out what works and doesn't work. It's a trial and error. It's like, okay, right, I sat home and meditated, but then I felt really isolated and that didn't work. Or I went to the family's house, it was so overwhelming. That so it takes some trial and error and give yourself some time, give yourself some patience, especially if you're in the first 1 or 2 years. You don't know, and that's okay.
So, Jason, where can people find you if they want more support?
Yeah,
And
so
wait a
oh
minute,
go
you
ahead.
you just had a new book come out,
Yes,
so
yes, it
let's
came
do that
out. Yeah,
first.
it came out on December 3rd. It's called Faces of Grief. It's 30 different stories of different types of loss. The couple of beautiful things about this book is that one, it's not just death related losses, it's losses to people, but also like divorce and incarceration and mental illness. So there's a really wide range of stories that you're going to find a story that's going to resonate with you. And the thing that I also love about it is that it's one of those things, like if you're dealing with the loss of a person, right, you can read the stories of death loss, and then you can put the book on the shelf. But then if you go through a divorce later on, boom, you're going to pull it out and read the divorce chapter, or the loss of a pet. Actually, one of the chapters is from a dog, about the loss of her owner, done through a pet communicator. So I think it's, so there's a pet loss component to it, and there's a lot. And the other beautiful thing is that it's people that are still raw in their grief, that don't, like, there's a couple of people that they don't have answers. They just have more questions than answers. They're in a real raw spot. And then people like myself, it's like 25 years, 26 years later, that have a lot of experience. So there's like that whole gamut. And I think that's a beautiful thing too, because I know sometimes when I talk about my like first stages, it, it's people may not resonate because they're in those raw stages, and I'm just not there anymore. And so having a couple of stories of people that are in that, I think is so helpful, especially for the early stage grievers, that so that they don't feel that they need to have all the answers now. Yeah.
Beautiful. So where can we find you?
Yeah, so the best place is my website, www.somaticgrieftherapy.com. I've got a link to the book. I've got my keynote I have you can download from there. I have an essential oils ebook on oils and grief and how you can use that to help fortify your body, so that this way you can deal with the emotional and the mental components to grief a little bit easier. So that's the best way. It's got connection to all my social media there as well. So that's the
Great.
easiest. And
And
for you?
we'll put that in the show notes, and we'll also put my stuff in the show notes as well. Best place to find me is heatherstang.com. Right now, I am writing almost an article a day on holiday loss. So you will want to definitely check out the blog on that site. And there's actually a page called Holiday Grief in my navigation bar that will take you to all of the holiday articles, which are just growing bigger and bigger because it's like an onion. There's so
Yeah.
many layers, and also links to my books. And there are now 3 books, because I also had a book release in
Yay.
November, Navigating Loss, which is non-death and disenfranchised losses as well as secondary losses. So this is a good book whether you've experienced a death related loss or a non-death loss. But I wanted to also just mention my guided journal, From
Yeah.
Grief to Peace, because that is a great holiday gift for bereaved people, because it will walk them through the body of grief, the emotions, the memory making. So check out the holiday articles if you're looking for a grief sensitive gift. Definitely From Grief to Peace is for all types of losses. And check back here. Be
Yeah.
sure to subscribe to the podcast. And I am so grateful for you, Jason, and
Oh.
everything you share.
Yeah, our collaboration just like fills my heart. And especially because, especially in the grief, it's so easy to do things alone and isolate and just forget that, oh, right, we have to do things in community. We have to do things in partnership. And we have to connect with other people that understand and get it, and aren't judgmental about, oh, you're 25 years in and you're still going through some things, right? Like there's so much out there, that just find your people. Like that's really important. And also the thing is through the holiday, find those little celebrations, like those little personal wins. I'm a big fan of, I mean, a lot of people say like those gratitudes, but even more importantly, like what did you like crush today? Like there's some, like even if it's I got out of bed, that's a win, right? Like I decided to eat something today, that's a win. I went outside for 3 seconds, that's a win. I got some, like these really basic, these little tiny victories, because we have to simplify those too. It's not like, oh, I felt happy today. That may not be, like that just may not be achievable in those early stages. But I took 3 deep breaths. Oh my God, that's a victory. So
I
all those little small things that you can cheer yourself on for.
I let myself crawl back under the covers and cry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. For me, like taking that day off and sitting on the couch and drooling, that was a huge victory because I very rarely let myself do that. And so I'm going to share also something that I do for my little victories. I have on my cell phone, I put a sound of people cheering. So every time I do that, I play that little thing and then I get the whole sound of a crowd going, ah,
Yay.
hooray! And so it just because with our the way our brain works is that if we don't start to celebrate those little victories, then we'll start to repeat them if we're encouraged to continue forward. So that this way, having a little victory, even a self high five, or give yourself a little pat on the back, something that works to allow yourself to have those little victories.
What a great closing bonus tip.
Yeah.
So, another victory, subscribe to the podcast that's doing something for your self care. And when you do that, you will help other people find this podcast. So, other people will be helped too.